that was great sharing. Um, oh, and the recording is now in progress. So, first, I thought we would talk a little bit about the sort of just two slides about the theoretical underpinnings of We Are Water, and then how we translate those sort of more conceptual ideas into practice in the program. So, the first thing is this community capacity model. We Are Water Minnesota is designed to build civic and community capacity to take action to protect water. And we do that by connecting, engaging, and educating people. First, connecting communities that host We Are Water Minnesota, take time to build relationships with new and different partners, and create a cross-sector planning group. So they're really collaboratively implementing and designing and implementing We Are Water in their community. Engaging communities that host We Are Water Minnesota develop and conduct engagement activities. They do 4 events that bring community members together around local water issues in different ways. And then educating. The traveling exhibit is a really core component of the program, and it includes like a lot of interactive educational pieces about water in various forms: stormwater, drinking water, wastewater, uh, you name it. And this whole program is built upon the theory, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, that the work based on the work of May Davenport and others at the University of Minnesota. And what May said is that building community capacity to protect water requires building relationships between community members, organizations, and sectors. And this model helps us understand that there are different levels of capacity in a community: individual, relational, organizational, and programmatic. And all of those are necessary for communities to take effective and coordinated action to protect water or really do anything in their community. Um, so Minnesota state agencies were super interested in this Maze, I call it Maze model because I just have heard May talk about it so much. So they worked with May Davenport to create a framework for gathering data on these capacities in community. And We Are Water Minnesota focuses specifically on the first 2 levels: individual and relational capacity. At the individual level, we look at whether an individual's beliefs, concerns, sense of responsibility, and capability support taking action to protect water. And we do a lot of evaluation with We Are Water, and 94% of people who come to the exhibit say they learned something new about water resources. 78% say they were exposed to a perspective that was different than their own regarding water resources. 75% say they will change how they personally use water. And 52% say they will get involved with local organizations working to protect water resources. I'll just share one quote from a visitor to the Hmong Museums. When the Hmong Museum hosted the exhibit, this person said, "I learned about the connection between water, spirituality, and folklore for the Hmong people. It made me realize that water is not just a utility, there are spiritual connections as well." So we focus on building relational capacity as well. Positive interpersonal relationships that promote information exchange, build trust, foster shared identity, and networks that promote positive social norms. So those are the kind of like the definition of relational capacity. And a quote from Tim Ruzak, Cedar River Watershed District. They hosted the exhibit in 2019, and he said, reflecting on the overall experience after hosting the exhibit, I now realize how much we gained through We Are Water Minnesota. We connected with and learned from our communities of color in ways I never imagined, and the process has changed the way I think about our outreach efforts, especially when I have new partnerships to lean on thanks to We Are Water Minnesota. So really, building this capacity in communities to take action. Um,
Yes. And as Jana mentioned, just their relationship building is a really key component of the program. And the We Are Water Minnesota program has really found that when people come together and start by sharing stories, so kind of like we all did just a moment ago, when we start that way, rather than diving immediately into issues or strategies or initiatives, they're a lot more likely to discover common ground. And that, in turn, creates conditions where people might be more willing to engage with one another, to listen to one another, and to make space for views that might differ from their own, especially as we're thinking about different water topics. So, the way this approach is taken within the We Are Water Minnesota program is primarily through the Minnesota Humanities Center's absent narratives approach, which you can kind of see an overview of on your screen here. So this has four main principles, again, from the Minnesota Humanities Center, one of the state partners involved in the program. And those four main principles are recognizing the power of story and the danger of absence. So really thinking about who is at the table as we're having these discussions around different water topics and who is missing or who has been excluded, who we need to bring to the table for this work. Learning from and with multiple voices, building and strengthening relationships. Okay, we hear this again and again. That's really pivotal to this work. And then amplifying community solutions for change. So, programmatically, this is sort of covered at the start of the cohort year when host sites take a training together at what is the host site retreat, which happens usually in October. And there is a specific session and focus time that's called Increased Engagement Through Absent Narratives. So, again, learning from the Minnesota Humanities Center about how to incorporate more of these principles into the work that's happening. And then coaching on this also happens throughout the cohort year. So it's not just limited to that one time. It's really practicing incorporating these principles into the work over time. Jana, I think you're muted.
Sorry.
There we go.
I just saw a comedy about this last night about people being muted. So anyway, uh, so what do we actually do? Those were the sort of like the two theories that underpin our work. And then what we do is actually bring a traveling exhibit to each host site. We do 5 host sites per year. And local stories are a core part of the project, as we said. They show up as we interview maybe a dozen people in the community and then use those edited audio stories in a listening station in the exhibit. We also print out inspiration stories that are part of the exhibit, quotes from these things, and then we also have a We Are Water Minnesota podcast. We work with each host site to curate and create local content, which I think of as sort of a portrait of water in this community. And that includes what we call the farm panel. It's a story of a local farmer who's engaged in water-friendly practices. There's a local panel, which is, comprises like 10 local stories, short pieces, about water issues, water success stories, local history, geology, hydrology, usually something about treaties and tribal history, um, local cultural stories of significance, whatever wastewater, stormwater, or drinking water things are important. So, like I said, 10 short pieces. And as a whole, the traveling exhibit is a collection of interactive. If you've been to the eco experience, you kind of get a sense of, these interactive exhibits that take up about 1,000 square feet of space and educate people about Minnesota's water history, geology, drinking water, etc. There's also each host site does at least 4 public events that bring people to the exhibit and together to interact with each other and their community in different ways around stories and water. And then we have I read that long list of state partners who collaborate on this exhibit, and they meet regularly and work where it's relevant with host sites to support their local content and their events in whatever way turns out to be appropriate.
So, as Jana said, the work of the state partners is a key part of this program, the We Are Water Minnesota program. And it's really fun now to be on the other end of this and see how valuable it can be to have the support of the state partners, but also how this program really bridges what's happening at the local level and how that's so critical to doing anything on a broader scale. So the 8 organizations that Jana listed earlier, and now you can see their logos on the screen, they collaborate in a number of ways to support this program. So they do that through promoting it, through leading the host site selection process, through overseeing evaluation of the program, which really informs the way that the program moves forward and can support different communities. They also connect their networks to the project. I've seen a number of times where that's been incredibly valuable for the local organizations to have sort of access to the networks of those state partners as well. And then just generally, they provide support not only to the program, but then to different host site communities as well.
So each host site, there's 5 host sites per year, and they learn together over a period of about 18 months. There's sort of like a program that they enroll in where they get a lot of support and training to implement We Are Water. They're encouraged to develop new partnerships and leverage current partnerships. And a big focus of those new partnerships is reaching communities who have been previously sort of unheard from, underrepresented in a host site organization's programming. They also invite diverse community members to share their stories. So, that's another way that the host site organization is connecting with new people, inviting them to be interviewed. They are trained and encouraged to practice new community engagement techniques. And like I've said a million times, they host four events. So, and as I've previously mentioned, evaluation is a big part of this program. Each site participates in a closing webinar after they've done their hosting. And that's an opportunity for all the partners to come together and think about, what was a success and where is their area for improvement. So it's ongoing. And then we have an evaluation firm called Creation in Common who does an evaluation report each year. But at the end of 2023, we hired this Creation in Common to do a more in-depth retrospective evaluation that went back and looked at the program over 8 years. And they did that by inviting about 78 people who hosted We Are Water in the past to participate in a survey. 24 of 30 host sites were represented in that survey data. And then 45 people from previous host sites were invited to participate in an in-depth interview process where they, went deep over, half hour to 2 hours and told us stories and provided other anecdotal data. And 15 out of 30 host sites participated in those interviews. So you can see, this is by 2023, there had been 5 exhibit tours, 30 sites had hosted the exhibit, 90,000 people had visited the exhibit, 20,000 had participated in an event, 212 new partnerships were formed, and 615 partnerships were involved in sort of implementing the exhibit. And we'd collected more than 3,000 stories from community members. And as you can imagine, this retrospective evaluation was dense and long, 50 single-space pages, which most of I will spare you. But I wanted to just share sort of 3 anecdotes from this evaluation that I thought are, telling and compelling. So the first is Lanesboro. They hosted the exhibit. They're in our first cohort year. They were one of our first sites. And they kind of illustrate the fact that many host organizations form new collaborations and partnerships, but that these collaborations and partnerships aren't just for the We Are Water exhibit. Many of them endure over many years and lead to other amazing projects and communities. So Lanesboro Arts and the Commonweal Theater Company are one such example, who have, after We Are Water, become a transformative force in their community. Um, they had a history of sort of like some tension and disagreement, but sort of reluctantly decided to collaborate to host We Are Water in 2016. And in the process, they not only healed their relationship, but their partnership really blossomed, and led to new things. Together in 2019, they produced the first annual Spring Arts Festival. Later that year, they produced a large mural in the theater district of Lanesboro, which is what you see on the slide. And really, like, because of this partnership, the idea of Lanesboro as an arts campus, which probably many of you have heard of, Lanesboro being this cultural mecca, it's really now sort of taken root in the state, and both organizations are committed to working together to foster Lanes, Lanesboro as a real hub for arts and creativity.
Another one of the primary learnings that came from this retrospective evaluation is that the program and the exhibit and events associated with it really help create space for difficult conversations about things that are complex and sometimes taboo. And so, as we said, water connects to all sorts of topics. And one example of this theme in question really coming to light was in Pipestone, when the Minders Community Library was involved in hosting We Are Water. They actually took the first step of sending letters to 46 organizations in their community, to garner support for their hosting of the exhibit. And their library director, Jody Wacker, shared that everyone told them that that was sort of a crazy step to be taking. In their particular area, farmers in particular were a little bit apprehensive about hearing from, in particular, maybe government organizations about how they should be stewarding water resources. And so from their hosting group, there was a little bit of pensiveness as they were approaching, what sorts of conversations will we have about water in our community? But in the end, Jody shared that moving forward with the exhibit ended up being a really major success. One of the most powerful impacts that she noted on the community came from, again, people coming together and having a place to be able to share the stories that they held in the community about water. And so you can see on the screen here, this is a map of part of their watershed. And this is something that happens at every exhibit site. So people are invited, visitors are invited to put a pin in the map and literally place themselves on that map as someone who has water stories from that place. They're invited to share a story. So maybe when a grandparent took them fishing, or maybe they experienced a drought as a kid, or something of that nature. But the act of placing themselves on that map, and then seeing other community stories really helped bridge divides in this particular community in Pipestone, that created a really much needed connection around a difficult topic. And ultimately, their library director shared that this was a really positive step forward for them as a community to dig into some of those more potentially contentious topics surrounding water stewardship in that place.
Another interesting finding is that many organizations, as a result of hosting We Are Water, broadened their focus to include water ongoingly in new and novel ways. And uh, one such example is the Becker County Museum, in Becker County. It's one of the oldest historical societies in the state. And just as they were gearing up to host We Are Water, they were also kicking off a Reimagine the Becker County Museum campaign. The Well, I won't say anything, but as a result of hosting We Are Water and this kind of coincidence, a huge number of people came to this tiny county museum that normally had about 100 visitors a year. And so they came to the museum, they were invited to participate in this Reimagine Becker County Museum, and people became really invested in the museum. They got involved in reimagining its place in the community. Becky Mitchell, the Becker County Museum director, said that, We Are Water really helped the museum and the community dream bigger about what this museum could be. And so now, in addition to their typical local history section, the museum is really involved in with the school, and they have a children's science floor with a STEM focus. There's a natural sciences area, and uh, they now like host school groups coming through the museum to learn from educators about STEM and natural resources. Becky, the museum director, shared that natural resources and water quality has become a bit of an underlying mission for the museum now. And that certainly started with the exhibit and listening to people talk about the importance of and their memories of water and the role it plays in their life. So the museum has kind of reinvigorated its role in the community. Um, so we are here talking to y'all because we think that a lot of you on this call might be interested in hosting We Are Water in your community. Applications are open now until June 27th. And we will invite people to interviews July 18th and select and notify host sites by August 12th. This year, as probably many of you know, or I mean, we're accepting applications for the 2026 year. And as many of you probably know, 2026 is the 100-year anniversary of the first water quality survey of the Mississippi River, the one that went from, was it Headwaters to Red Wing, and found three live fish or two live fish and one dead one. I've heard different things. Anyway, that it's the 100-year anniversary this year. And to celebrate that, we are hoping to solicit applications from river communities and river focused communities. Uh, so that would be for 2026. But some of you might also, if you're not a river community, start thinking now about what it would look like to host the exhibit in 2027 as well.
I would also just briefly add, as Jana said, I'm no longer with the program, but it was very formative for me in the way that I think about water. And now working for a small WMO very much informs the way I think about community engagement and bringing people to the table to think about water. I would note this came up in the presentation, but the importance of partnership, especially as maybe you're mulling over this idea of hosting, especially if you're a smaller organization. In my time with the exhibit, we really saw it work well when people were able to start cultivating those partnerships or, connecting with nearby organizations even prior to applying to start those conversations of what would it look like to partner on something like that. I would say one place where I saw this work really well, some of you may have even attended some of their events, was Chisago County, who hosted the exhibit last summer, so summer of 2024. And they ended up having a partnership group of about 10 different organizations. So it was at the county level, their water resources, Chisago SWCD. They partnered with local lake associations and lake improvement districts, as well as libraries, the North Branch Area Library, the Lower St. Croix Partnership, the City of Lindstrom, their local historical society. They went above and beyond, but all of that is to say that, again, sort of anecdotally and also from a data perspective, it works really well when you are able to sort of start cultivating those partnerships and think about, again, maybe your local historical society, you might not think of them as being a water organization. But as we've said, there are so many connecting points to water. So that can really enhance this work. And I think that a lot of the skills you can build through this cohort can enhance a lot of the watershed level work that we all are doing as well. So it's neat to get to see this from the other side. So thanks for letting me be here, Jana.
Yeah, no, thank you, Angela. Which is, we were sharing that all to say, it takes some capacity to do this program. And if you're a small organization, partnerships can, you know, help you share that load a little bit. I wanted to just open the floor to some questions now. I see one from Rachel for organizations that hope to explore meaningful ways to connect with community. How did you create precedent at the state to start We Are Water? Um, and that's a great question. Very brief history of the program is that Minnesota Humanities, the Smithsonian has this sort of thing called Museum on Main Street, which creates small traveling exhibits for communities of 10,000 or less, so that there's a way to sort of, have exhibit spaces in small communities. And so the Minnesota Humanities Center applied for that program to host a water themed exhibit that I think was called Waterways. Yes. And they invited the Pollution Control Agency to partner with them on that initial program in 2016. And what happened that year was that the most popular part of that Smithsonian exhibit was the local content that each community kind of like worked with the MPCA to create. Those local stories, those local water issues, that sort of portrait I was talking about was really the most popular part of the exhibit. And so they decided after Waterways went away to keep the exhibit going. And as probably a lot of you know, the MPCA has some pretty stellar uh, exhibit designers and fabricators. And so they kind of created their own traveling exhibit and kept that local content component. And for a long time, I don't know how many years, it was funded by this kind of like piecemeal thing. They were always kind of struggling to find funding and finally landed that found kind of like a stable source of funding. So it wasn't like the state decided to do it initially. It like had a lot of successes, demonstrated a lot of successes. And I think, it's sort of like built on this uh, theory by that, this community capacity building thing is something the state's really interested in. So I think, I don't know if that answered your question, but oh, you say super interesting and helpful to hear. Yeah, I think demonstrating those successes is a really important part, which is why the evaluation is built in and ongoing to show that we're really creating capacity to protect water. Does anyone have other questions? We'd love to answer, questions about logistics or anything. Oh,
Hey,
Chris, hi.
Jana and Angela, hi. Thanks for this. It's great to hear these stories and hear about the impact. I've gone to several We Are Water exhibits and really always learn a lot. And I'm curious, you've given some compelling stories about relationships that were built and continued on into new work. What do the agencies that are involved, and particularly the We Are Water team, do um, to support these teams going forward? Because sometimes you put a lot of effort into having a very successful exhibit and all of the 4 events, Jana, that happen around it and everything, but then you kind of say, "Whew, that's done." And there are residual partnerships and different things, ongoing work that happens. But in general, people say, "Okay, we've accomplished that," and kind of go back to business as usual. So how do you address those challenges?
Yeah, that's a great question, Chris. Thank you. Well, I'll say a few things and then maybe Angela will also uh, have something to add. But we try to, like the previous host sites generally are quite involved in onboarding the new host sites. So it's not kind of it's we don't just sort of like, okay, that's done and like cut our relationships. We do sort of continue to incorporate, and there's like some mentoring that previous host sites do with new host sites. And I mean, we also continue to engage people and like we'll reach out and ask, a host will we sort of connect new host sites with previous host sites so that they actually are sort of mentoring, which isn't us supporting them so much as us sort of keeping them involved. There's no continued funding for previous host sites, I don't believe. Um, so it's really it's it's sort of voluntary. Like we're here and wanting to continue to engage if people want to keep engaging with us. Um, Anything to add to that, Angela?
I would say briefly from more of a content perspective as well. Yes, relationally, I think that was super helpful. One thing that I've seen as a huge asset for host site communities is they get to keep all of that local content that's created. And so then I know in this group we talk a lot about resources and what can I bring to events and what can I be sharing with people. All that beautiful, crisp, professionally designed that your team has approved content gets to stay with you for future events. And so that has been something I know I've seen a number of previous hosts kind of continue to utilize that content when they're talking about water in their community because it is so powerful to have, these local stories that have been sort of gathered as part of this. So that's maybe more on the content side, but that I think can have a lasting impact too of sort of keeping those visible and audible for community members too.
Yeah. Did, did that sort of answer your question, Chris?
Yeah, those are some good ideas. It's I know it's always a challenge, and particularly when there isn't some kind of an ongoing um, group, that's supported and continues to interact. That keeping people involved is always a challenge.
Yeah. I see from Cap Region in the chat the question about does it cost anything to host the exhibit? And the answer is no, it does not cost anything. Like once you are involved in the program, your travel and attendance at our host site events is all paid for, and all the training and coaching we have we do sort of, is it monthly or weekly coach or bi-weekly coaching of host sites? All that is include just paid for by the program, so there's no cost. We also provide each host site with a $5,000 sort of stipend to pay for hosting community events. And a lot or most people, like that's what they spend on their events. Some and I think we even sometimes reimburse people for some staff time that they're spending on, up to that $5,000. So everybody kind of recoups their $5,000. Then it sort of depends on like the organization. I mean, we've had community events that like we just hosted the exhibit at Shakopee Mdewakanton Sioux Community's Hocho Katati Museum, and they have their museum and their cultural center has a budget. And so they did some really amazing, like very elaborate events that clearly cost more than $5,000. For example, their last event was this amazing fashion show with a DJ and lighting, and they flew in designers from all over the country to like present their fashion collection, and it was a really fun, amazing event. But really events of any size are welcomed, and sometimes so the smaller, more intimate events have a bigger impact. So hosting looks so different at each location. It's really informed by the host site and what their goals and priorities are. Lori Hawk asks, is We Are Water anticipated to continue for the foreseeable future? Yes, yes, it is. Right now, we have a stable funding source, and people continue to apply. So we do anticipate that the program will continue for years to come. Yay, stable funding. Yes, we like stable funding. Other questions?
Jana, if folks have questions after this meeting, can they reach out to you directly? Is that the best
Yeah, I
way?
was just about to put my contact information up on the screen. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Yeah. So please reach out to me anytime. Jana.larson@state.mn.us. There's my phone number. The application and more information is also available on the Minnesota Humanities Center website at mnhum.org/water. So please reach out. And thank you so much for the opportunity to share about this program today. It's great to see you all.
Thank you so much for being here, Jana and Angela. Really awesome presentation and really fun to get the chance to, yeah, share our own water stories as part of it. That was really fun.
Bye, everyone. Have a great rest of your meeting.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. So I will stop our recording.